So, as if he hasn't been heard very much over the past several years, and in case anyone was wondering, Antonio Brown really wants to retire a Steeler.
Oh,
He
does he?
tweeted that out today,
Did he really?
and I feel like it was unprompted, although I don't know the entire backstory to it. But he's tweeting out now that he really wants to be signed by the Steelers. Maybe this is because no other teams are showing any amount of interest in signing him
Yeah.
ahead of the 2022 season.
Yeah.
But interesting how things come around and people realize maybe the grass isn't always greener on the other side.
We talked
But
about this. Didn't we talk about this last week, kind of with the Baker Mayfield, like the idea of like when there's money, like you just don't know how good you have it sometimes. And I think
yeah,
feel like we've talked about that with the Steelers before. You had mentioned like Le'Veon Bell, they offered him a lot more money than he ended up turning down, sits out a whole year and didn't get anywhere close to that money. It can happen, and it can happen quickly in the NFL. Listen, I think the Steelers would be absolutely insane to look at
yeah,
Antonio Brown.
I
I
don't
don't
think
think
it's
they
happening.
will. I don't think they will. That's the last thing you want to bring into a locker room when you finally feel like it's a fresh changing of the guard. You know what I mean?
Sure.
All of that decade of the triple Bs and Big Ben Roethlisberger, it's all gone now. And yeah, the last thing you want is to bring back Antonio Brown, especially for any sort of sentimental stuff. If I'm the Steelers, you kind of want to distance yourself, honestly, like a little bit and
Oh,
say, hey, you
sure.
know what? He was a great player for us, and we wish him nothing but the best of luck. But our team is looking to go in a different direction. And if the whole like
Yeah.
retire a Steeler thing, I mean, that just seems weird because he's not going to get a statue. And I mean, maybe that's what he's trying to play for at this point. He's like, I should my number retired and all that stuff. Well, you could have if you had just, stayed and not gone all loopy and basically forced the Steelers' hands.
Yeah, it's a weird that he would, think that this is something that, has been earned in any way. I mean, yes, his play on the field was incredible. I still think Hall of Fame credential worthy,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, to get a sentiment like that, to have a 1-day contract, even to just retire with the team, that's usually done from the team putting forth some sort of gesture
And a
of good
PR move.
faith. Yeah, and this is like I could even see Seattle after things cool over doing something like that with Bobby Wagner perhaps one day if he were to
Yeah,
want
because
that.
Wagner will only play just a couple more years of that Rams
Yeah.
contract. And
And
he'll
maybe, even though things didn't,
yeah,
end on the best of terms, perhaps
absolutely.
that's something that can be smoothed over. I don't feel that things with AB can be smoothed over, considering in
Yeah.
the city of bridges, he's burned quite a few of them. So
They do have a lot of bridges.
they have very many. So yeah, I just thought that was interesting and
That's
wanted to start the
wild.
show off
I
with that
mean,
because out of nowhere too, it's like what I mean, a random
did
Monday
he officially
in May.
retire because he's like my ankle and the Bucks screwed me and it's all the Bucks' fault?
I don't even know. Honestly, I've tried to
He
block
can't
out a
keep
lot
up.
of
Yeah.
the news from AB because it's just been so many
Yeah.
stories that have come out with him over the past couple years. It's a fairly exhausting saga to pour through. But anyways, there's a lot more than Antonio Brown news to get to today, Mark. We've got
Yeah.
of course, the NFL schedule, which is going to be kind of the headlining moment of our show here today, but a lot of different tidbits of news and stuff around the league. We'll talk about the broadcast teams that have been solidified as well. That ties into the schedule, of course. Some news with Tom Brady, Drew Brees,
Jair
and
Alexander.
Jair Alexander. That's a big one, of course, today, getting locked up there in Green Bay. And we'll kind of add in some quirks of this year's schedule as well. There's a few things that have happened the first time in 50 years. There are some things that are very unique to this year's schedule. So excited to kind of look at that. But
Yeah.
we could start with that big one, Mark, that you just mentioned there. Jair Alexander, probably the best, if not top 3 corner in the NFL, right up there with, the Jalen Ramseys of the world, gets locked up by Green Bay, 4-year deal worth. And I just lost it now. It was a very large deal. Was it 84 million? I believe. I lost the tab here. So
Hold on.
it is a $84 million extension,
Yeah.
4 years. So a very rich extension there for Alexander. But look, I mean, and obviously they missed him this past season
Yeah.
for quite a stretch there. But when healthy, he is a force. And when you're talking about a team that lost Devontae Adams to keep its next best player, of course, next to Aaron Rodgers, it's a smart move all around, especially to get a corner those are just hard to find in the league, and really, really elite ones even harder.
They're becoming a premier position that you just pay, especially he's fallen into that kind of perfect storm too, where it's like his best years are you really still, you can project he's entering that 2 to 3 year window where if the play stays and the health is there, he's going to be the best. You know what I mean? So many times you think back to when corners have demanded big money, for like a guy like Jalen Ramsey, again, it came at the right time. It's like, okay, he has just entered his prime and he's available for that big contract. You got to go get it done. Versus those guys like Darrelle Revis or some of those people who are like trying to bank off their name at the end of their career and looking for a big payday. You never want to pay a corner that, because when they fall off, it can fall off quickly, because corner is a position all about having just that extra step above your competition. And then when you're the guy past their prime and you're now the step below, unless you're a big physical corner, a guy like a Charles Tillman comes to mind because he has played past his prime, but still really valuable in certain situations because you could just, the 6'4" could cover guys physically that other guys couldn't. You're just not as worth it. So they're paying him at the right time. It's a smart move. It's a lot of money, but the cornerback position has become a premier pay position. Corner, pass rusher on defense are the things you need the most because it's a passing league. So the best way you can combat a passing offense is with a lockdown corner and an extremely good pass rush. Everything else is a little bit find ways to make it work. So it makes sense for the Packers. And listen, if you're Green Bay, you feel comfortable in the NFC right now, but you say to yourself, we need a Jair Alexander if we're getting to the Super Bowl, and you're going up against one of the plethora of AFC teams with multiple number one guys at the wide receiver position.
Sure. I mean, and even have to get through teams like, potentially Deebo Samuel if he's with the 49ers. You got to get
Rams.
through any of the Rams trio / quintuplet of receivers.
Yeah.
Arizona, might be in play. So yeah, there's a lot of very good receivers in the league, and cornerback is a premium position as you mentioned. I'm going to kick the can down the road a little bit here because Tom Brady obviously had a huge announcement. But before we get to that, it kind of ties into it. Tom Brady with his announcement about joining the analyst booth at some point post-career.
Yeah.
Drew Brees had received some flack amidst this news with people saying, it doesn't always work out with the former Hall of Fame quarterbacks trying to go into
Look
the
how
booth.
trash
Drew Brees, and he's taken quite a bit of flack
getting a lot of
over the past week. And partly in response to this, he tweeted out today, quote, "Despite speculation from media about my future this fall, I am currently undecided. I may work for NBC. I may play football again. I may focus on business and philanthropy. I may train for the pickleball tour, senior golf tour, or coach my kids, or all of the above. I'll let you know." So obviously, a lot of people are actually taking this like at face value. It seems pretty clearly in jest, and he's having some fun with it. But I mean, there is a good point to it that these guys don't automatically translate to that career afterwards. Now, obviously, Drew Brees is a fairly likable guy in a lot of ways, a good leader, knows the game very well, but sometimes it's just about putting all those things together and packaging it into a presentation format that might be a little difficult. But I just thought that was a funny thing from him to kind of put that out there, and the fact that there are quite a few people actually taking this seriously. I don't know.
I thought for sure a year ago at this time you'd have told me that you would have the future of NBC Sunday Night Football would be Tirico and Breeze. And I think Breeze took it personally when NBC wasn't sold enough on him to basically say, hey, we kind of like you in the current job you're doing. Just keep with the Notre Dame football and some Sunday Night Football in America stuff, maybe some side interviews, but we don't want to put you in the booth, on our prime time. It just hasn't worked out that way. And he wasn't great. And, color commentary is a lot like, it's a lot like anything else. You could even relate to football. Like, yeah, you want your quarterback as a rookie. Like when Andrew Luck pops, you're just like, oh crap, he's going to be great. Right. You can see it right away. And then there's the rookies where it's like, oh, if your rookie is not great, okay, they can make improvements. But really, what rookie besides maybe Peyton Manning, and he's the great exception, had like a bad rookie year and then went on to become a Hall of Famer? I have a feeling that play-by-play is in color commentary is a lot like that. If you're really good early, then you could end up being one of the greats. But if you stink early, the best you could do would be like, oh, okay, he's not terrible. Like, he's gotten better at it. Like, I'm sure Drew Brees could have gotten better, but his ceiling still would have been very low, I think, as a play-by-play guy. And I think he's frustrated, and I think he's also got a buttload of money, and he realizes, well, wait a minute. I don't have to do this, especially if I'm going to get criticism and I didn't get offered the job that I would have wanted to do it, because then you're kind of mainstream, you're big time, going up against the Tony Romos and the Troy Aikmans and those alike. So I don't think he's playing. God knows. I really don't think he's going to play. But I think Tom's going to be elite. I know maybe we'll talk about that later. I'll save maybe those thoughts for a bit. But I think for Drew Brees, it just, it's tough. I mean, look what happened to Jason Witten. He got it for a year. They tried it. We knew it was brutal by week 2. He took the arrows all season long, went back to football, and then now is just quietly written off. You know what I mean? He's retired. No one talks about Jason Witten anymore, or his bad fake hair. And he's going to be a Hall of Famer. Drew Brees, I think, the same way. These guys got a lot of money, and as soon as they start getting criticized big time left and right, they realize, maybe this isn't best thing for my brand.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say he was as disastrous, Drew Brees, as some other examples.
Well, he wasn't as bad as Witten, no.
Yeah, and there are plenty of areas that he could improve in and stuff like that. But I absolutely agree that when someone hits, it. I mean, you knew Tony Romo was going to be great. I feel like Greg Olson kind of fit that bill pretty early on too.
Yeah.
You just kind of felt like this guy's going to be able to make it, and so. And you find out too, it's not the easiest gig. It's personality driven, but it's about using your personality and finding a way to package what in an easy presentation. And sometimes a lot of quarterbacks know so much that it's hard for them to tell a layman what's going on.
Precise. Exactly.
But Peyton does that very well. And I think Tom Brady's going to be great at it. So, I mean, we can, if you had another thought on Drew Brees, go for it. Otherwise, figure we'll just, we'll talk about this Tom Brady thing.
Yeah, no, listen, I saw the news and I thought immediately home run. Like anyone used, a lot of people you saw that immediately, the Joe Montana, the Drew Brees pushback. They're like, these guys aren't always as great. Tom Brady, to me, everything points to him being really, really good at this. In the same way that everyone felt whenever Peyton Manning would get to do whatever he wanted to do, he'd be really, really good at it. Tom's got a great personality. He's already been doing a lot of on-camera stuff with his Tom versus Time and The Man in the Arena. So he's done 2 documentaries here over the last 3-4 years. So he's, I think, used to being more around that. He's doing a lot on social media, very active on his own Instagram. Selfieing himself, recording himself. So I think there's already seeing a lot more of that personality that he's just got the kind of it factor. And I think on top of that, he's Tom bleeping Brady. Even if he's terrible in the booth, and I don't think he will be, it's still a good deal for Fox. Because if you notice in the fine print of the contract, not the fine print, but in the big press release, he's also being paid to basically be the football ambassador for Fox. And Fox Sports, knowing that a guy like Terry Bradshaw and that crew is incredible. But the more you watch Terry Bradshaw, it's starting to get a little bit more Lee Corso-y, where it's like they're waiting for him to catch up. I mean, he's been brilliant for a long, long time, but the end is nigh for a guy like Terry Bradshaw. And Tom Brady could easily, if he's not great in the booth, could easily fill any of the roles on that panel. But he'll also be so much more for them. Who's going to turn down a Tom Brady interview for like a Fox pregame show? Who's going to turn down, all of those exclusives that Tom Brady can get? He'll reach out to people and they'll 100% choose, do you want to do this interview with, Tony Romo, or do you want to do it with Tom Brady? Like, they're going to be able to get stuff and he's going to be able to get stuff for Fox. It's just beyond that. And you think about how many times Troy Aikman is on with like Colin Cowherd or on all the Fox Sports, shows, the FS1 stuff. They will use him for that to help build those brands as well. And so I think it's just a terrific move for Fox. And I think by the end of the contract in 10 years, whenever it is, they'll be saying you're only paying Tom Brady $37.5 million. That'll be a steal to line up for his next contract with Fox or whoever once the bidding goes to the next haul. And also, you just lost Troy and Joe. You're probably not paying Kevin Burkhardt much at all. And Kevin Burkhardt's very good. He certainly could be the future big game voice for Fox. I absolutely believe in Kevin Burkhardt in that way. But you probably combined were paying Joe and Troy about $37 million a year. So you're basically just replacing Joe and Troy with Tom Brady. And so I think in a business sense, when you look at the numbers like that, that's not astronomical in that way as well, that we're now Fox got to worry about going bankrupt because of the Tom Brady move. I think he's going to be great, Dan. And we'll rank the booths here, and we'll just insert the Tom Brady Kevin Burkhardt booth, even though he's not doing it this year. I already think they could be top two.
Oh yeah, it's very, very plausible. It's a 10-year, $375 million deal with Fox Sports for Tom Brady once he retires. That will pay him more than he has made in his NFL career, if you can believe that.
Yeah.
But it's well worth every penny. As you said, it's perfect for advertising, and Fox Sports has just been on the rise year after year after year in this space. And so here it gets a hold of the greatest to ever do it, and it just makes too much sense to get a guy like him out there in the booth. And to your point too, he's got so many relationships, not only in the NFL but outside of it. His business acumen is high. The guy's he's been very active in life in general in a lot of aspects to it. And I think that will help better prepare him for whatever transition process this may be, versus maybe some lifelong guys that were just such like football dudes that's like all they really like cared about, and then just like didn't, focus much on anything else. Maybe this will give him a little bit of a leg up in that regard too, just from that aspect of having to form business relationships, not just relationships on the football field.
Also, I'll add this to it. Tom Brady is a film junkie. And I mean, you have to watch a bunch of film to be good at doing color and play-by-play. That's going to be no issue for him. Also, Fox is really headquartered when they do their football stuff in either New York or LA. The pregame stuff is in LA. Tom has homes in both places. It's very well known about him and Giselle's, and his son in New York and the time he spends in New York, but then also obviously the time they spend in LA. It makes sense for the family. And Gronk worked for Fox for that 1 year he was retired. And Tom and Gronk are so close. I think absolutely Gronk probably gave him the like, dude, these are good people. This is going to be good. And it wouldn't shock me if all of a sudden you see Gronk re-signing with Fox Sports as well. The stuff they would do together, having some of the lighter side fun stuff. I think it's going to be a kind of a playground for them to just enjoy. And again, the depth of knowledge that Tom will bring, the stories he will be able to tell, and the interviews he'll be able to get, because no one's going to turn down Tom Brady for those all exclusives. You think you're going to have those moments where, the young quarterback has a chance to sit down with Tom Brady and he's not going to do it? They're going to get so much great content out of it. And I think it's absolutely a home run. And him and Burkhardt, again, I think they're about the same age. Like, Kevin Burkhardt's not an old guy. Like, he is a future big game voice for Fox. And so I like that they're getting paired up in the sense that they will be able to grow a relationship together. Burkhardt's been great with Greg Olson. I think he's going to probably be with Greg Olson on the main calls again all this year. And I think they'll just be a really, really good team going forward.
Yeah, and so speaking of teams, I know that you have kind of the
I have
list
the
of
list.
these broadcast teams. We've had a lot of switch ups this offseason in terms of what to look forward to for Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football, new Thursday Night
Massive
Football on
trade.
Amazon Prime. We got Fox
Yes.
Sports. So yeah, give us the list here, and let's see who we think.
So the only thing that is the same from the last year is CBS, Nance and Romo. And so they
Pretty
have
solid.
it's an extremely solid crew. I think at this point in time they would be my number 2 crew in the football ranking world. Fox is going to be Kevin Burkhardt and Tom Brady when he's done. I believe it will be Greg Olson on the big Fox games, America's game of the week or whatever Fox calls it, right? And then NBC is now Mike Tirico and Collinsworth. ESPN is Joe Buck and Troy. And I think they're still my number 1, especially moving to ESPN. I think they're going to open up even a little bit more, have a little bit more fun. I think ESPN is going to let them do some other stuff, and just getting them on ESPN, the worldwide leader, like they need more. They'll be on a lot more platforms and stuff that I think will be great access.
Sure.
And then Amazon Thursday Night Football all this year is Al Michaels and Kirk Herbstreit. And this is a really interesting pairing because to me, it is Al who is on the very last legs, but it's still just an all-time great, maybe the greatest of all time, and still good. Like he's not prime Al Michaels, but
Yeah, but he can still, yeah,
still very good. And Kirk Herbstreit, who is was so good for so many years, and had it as a main man at ESPN as the color guy for college football, getting a chance to take a huge payday to do a lot less work than he had to do for ESPN. And so I think he's going to be freed up. I think he's so good. I think him and Al are going to be terrific together on Thursday Night Footballs. And I think the NFL rewarded Amazon and that crew. The Thursday Night Football matchups this year are pretty darn good.
They are, and we'll get to those matchups, of course, with the NFL schedule. I'm looking forward to all of these pairings, honestly. Like you never want any of them to fail because you want the product to be good as a fan. And we know that Monday Night Football's had its struggles over the years, and Sunday Night Football, despite having some powerhouse there, it's felt a little bit stale at times as well.
Yeah.
Look, I think I would agree with you that Joe Buck and Troy Aikman are a star-studded duo. They're really good. I think it's become the cool thing to like hate on them for some reason. I think they're very good, and they're very just solid. I would still put Nance and Romo for me as my top unit. Now they're not going to get a prime time, because CBS doesn't have that, Sunday Night Football or anything like that. But I still look forward to them. They would be my top unit. I would put Troy and Joe Buck as number 2 for Monday Night Football. And then, I'd probably go with Al and Herbstreit there at 3 just for the excitement. I mean, as you mentioned, we're not going to know with Kevin Burkhardt and Tom, because especially with Tom, because we haven't even seen him do color analysis. I could easily see him being them being the number 1 or number 2 once that time comes. But for now, that would be my top 3, and then it would kind of be a toss-up, really, between Tirico
NBC, like Collinsworth, they got to figure that out because Mike Tirico took that job 10 years ago when he left ESPN. And the ESPN's kind of been in disarray since then. They did okay until Gruden left, and then ever since Gruden left, it's been a real disaster. Tirico basically took that job knowing I'm going to be the voice of NBC, and I will wait for 10 years behind Al Michaels to be the voice of NBC. So he's finally getting his shot, and I just thought they would have it better lined up to have the next, just change that booth together at once.
Yeah.
Collinsworth just seemed like when Al left, either Chris would go with him to Thursday Night Football, or Chris would then also move on. I think it's going to be
he's got PFF as well.
Yeah.
So it's like, the guy could just go and focus on that, but at least for this year, he's sticking with it.
Either way, it's gonna be one of those funny things like Thursday football, first Thursday night football, Al Michaels and Kirk Herbstreit. It's gonna be like, well, this is kind of
Yeah.
wild. It's a little different. And that Sunday night kickoff game when you're gonna get Mike Tirico and Collinsworth, it's gonna feel a little weird, that's for sure.
It absolutely is. Another note that I forgot to mention, Mark, it probably would have gone well with the Drew Brees note, but the Saints signing Jarvis Landry, so another
Yeah.
wide receiver off the board here in free agency, a 1 year, $3 million deal can go up to 6 million with incentives. So all of a sudden, New Orleans, that receiving core, they added Chris Olave in the draft. They get Jarvis Landry here, and of course, Michael Thomas returns from injury. All of a sudden, that receiving core becomes really dangerous just a year
Yeah.
after it was kind of in total disarray.
Yeah, Olave is kind of your new deep threat. Michael Thomas and Jarvis are two of the best slant route runner, quick throw guys. And a lot of that was Drew Brees. But, a lot of ways, I think Jarvis is so great for Jameis because Jameis, while he's really good at pushing the ball down the field, it's also when he makes a bunch of his mistakes. So having guys who their specialty is like, Jameis, no. You're only looking 10 to 15 yards down the field. I sometimes think that may be better for the Saints and like for Jameis overall to kind of rein him in like, hey, don't give Jameis a bunch of Mike Evans and guys who just want deep bombs and straight routes because he'll throw them and not when he should throw them. So this will be a really interesting wide receiver core. The other, wide receiver news, I don't know if you wanted to touch on it, like the Jerry Jeudy stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting.
My thought on that 100% was now it is interesting that the girl. So if you don't know, he got arrested, and the story is basically he locked his girlfriend's stuff and their child. So he's a girlfriend and they have a child together. Some of the baby stuff, and he locked his girlfriend's like keys and stuff in his car, so she couldn't leave and get access to him. So basically, kind of holding someone hostage.
Yeah.
She called the cops basically saying to her quotes of saying like, I may need help, like getting my stuff out. The cops, and I think rightfully so, were like, this is something we need to just get to, not monitor a situation. We need to be there. There's some sort of, leaning towards domestic, disturbance. To our knowledge, there was no hands put on. There was no physicality. There's no abuse in that way. It seems as though two young people, a child involved, a disagreement got out of hand quickly.
Yeah, heightened emotion.
And for Jerry Jeudy, I would imagine the girlfriend has now since asked for the charges to be dropped. Oh, I thought that was interesting. That was ESPN reporting that I read from them. But there still could be some discipline from the league. I think it would be fairly minor, especially if the charges are dropped and the girlfriend drops the charges and all that. But this is, again, when that story pops up and you read the details, it is, if I'm an agent of a player, if I'm a friend of a player, if I'm a parent of a player, if I'm a brother of a player, if I have any influence over a player in the NFL, in the NBA, in any sport, I'd say read that bleeping story front to back. And you just got to remember that how quickly things can turn. And what you may think is you're doing the right thing and it's your child and emotions. You have to remain calm, try to handle things in civil ways because your career can end quickly. Because if that had turned into one extra drink and a little more emotion and all of a sudden hands are laid on someone, that, you know what I mean? There goes a career. And rightfully so, because you should never put hands on another person and behave in a way that's infringing on another human being's rights. And he did that in a sense, but it seems as though there's a relationship between them, and it in a moment it got heated, but it was so close. And that's why I tweet out like, that is the nightmare scenario as an NFL fan, right? You wake up and one morning you see a star from your team in the headlines with domestic and arrest. I mean, that is nightmare scenario 101.
Yeah, it's not good news, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So nothing good's coming out of this one. But yeah, no, it's something to monitor. Obviously, he was taken into custody and then released on bond quickly thereafter. And so we'll see what comes of it. It looks like it may fizzle out at this point, but yeah, I mean, it's a warning sign for sure, especially to his teammates. I'm sure as well. Um, but yeah, that could have gone much worse. And on another quick note, Deshaun Watson is set to meet with
Yeah.
NFL officials this week, and there's not a whole lot of details that have come out regarding this meeting, but this could very spell the future, um, or the term future for Watson for the Browns as to what's going to happen here. So
Yeah.
obviously the NFL going to be discussing with him these pending lawsuits, civil suits that have been filed, and we'll see probably sooner rather than later at this point whether or not a suspension is actually going to be levied. Time will tell, but this is the kind of first thing to get the ball rolling that we've seen in some time since his signing. So it's
Yeah.
it's
I
the
mean,
first thing.
you nailed it. It's we'll talk more when we know more, but it definitely feels as though the NFL has finally taken that breath, stepped back, and realized, all right, we need to address this in some way, shape, or form because the season is going to start getting close. These training camps are going to start opening, and need to know exactly as a front of the NFL, like how we're going to proceed while these pending lawsuits are out there, civil suits are out there. So we'll wait and see. I'm fascinated to hear what comes to the meeting. That's for sure.
All right, Mark, let's get to the schedule. There are some interesting
Yes.
tidbits from the schedule, as well as some really spicy matchups to start the season and some really good primetime games as usual.
Yeah.
So we'll kind of highlight some that pop out to us. But I wanted to throw a couple quick facts and then I'll maybe sprinkle a couple more in here as we get talking and stuff like that. But your Chicago Bears, made some history, something that hasn't been done in Chicago in nearly 60 years, Mark. They get the entire month of December at home. That's 3 home games
Yeah.
and a bye week. So not on the road in the month of December. A pretty solid gift there from the NFL. That's something that hasn't happened to the Bears since 1964. Of course, we know that the weather gets extra cold, and certainly the winter elements are in full force there in December in Chicago. So, all of these teams traveling there, which are going to include the Packers in Week 13, their bye in Week 14, and then they have uh,
Eagles and
home
Bills.
games and the Eagles and Bills after that. Obviously, all those teams are used to the cold weather, but Chicago getting that home field advantage there in the entire month.
It's a really great. It's a tough stretch for the Bears to end, but you're right. The travel hopefully could be good because the only away game once you hit December in a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 game stretch, the only time the Bears have to leave is just to go to Detroit, and that is on New Year's Day. So that is a real quick trip over to Detroit in division, and then they, ending the season hosting the Vikings. So part of the reason why I do feel the Bears' schedule is very workable. In the NFL, of course, they do this because when your team's bad and you get that last place schedule, that second, those bottom schedules versus the top schedules, things can really fall your way because they want those teams that didn't do well to have a chance to be better. The NFL is all about getting those 2 or 3 teams that made the playoffs last year to miss the playoffs, get 2 or 3 new teams into the playoffs. It's very much how the NFL schedule always seems to turn out and for teams. And let me just say this. We could talk about it a little later, but I feel good about that as a Bears fan.
It's a very interesting, note and tidbit to come out of this NFL schedule release. The Chiefs also get quite a doozy to start the year. I'm sure we'll talk more about that, but they will become the first team in NFL history to open a season with 8 consecutive games against teams that finished above 500 the year before. That stretch, of course, starts in Week 1 and continues all the way to Week 9. Week 1,
It's
they
a
open the
crazy
season
run.
against Arizona. But yeah, the 8-game gauntlet here
The
at the
easy,
Cardinals.
the easy games you would say would be at Indy, and then like hosting the Raiders. Like, I mean, those are your easy games in your first 2 weeks. That's
Yeah,
it's crazy.
at the Cardinals, against the Chargers, at the Colts, at the Buccaneers, at home against the Raiders, the Bills, 49ers, the bye, and then at home against the Titans. So they do get 4 home games in a row there. But certainly no slouches, as those teams are some powerhouses. That is a very tough one. I mean, yeah, you'd think
It's
the
brutal.
Titans, might be favorable, especially coming off the bye, and Andy Reid is notoriously good coming off the bye. But I mean, to begin the year,
But even then, it's in prime time. It's a Sunday night football game.
yeah, and anything can happen. So
It is a
it's
wild
very
start. And
interesting.
what's crazy about the Chiefs' schedule is so post that Titans game, after that first 8 weeks, it's not like it's much easier. You get the Jags, that's great. But then it's Chargers, Rams, Bengals, Broncos, 4 in a row. To then have a break, your break is a 2-game stretch against the Texans and Seahawks, but then they end the season against divisional opponents, the Broncos and the Raiders. It is, I mean, obviously we knew this would be wild with the AFC West because every time you look at an AFC West team and their schedule, you're going to see 6 games that you're like, oh, that's brutal, because those are just their own 6 division games. And then when you add in the fact that they have the NFC West as well, games with the Cardinals and the Rams, you throw in obviously the Bills game, and the AFC South with the Titans and the Colts not being the elite of the AFC, but they are certainly competitive teams that will be well coached and have the ability to win those games. They're not going to be pushovers. It is the Chiefs are in for a big year. And again, it doesn't work. Would it worry me as a Chiefs fan? Well, here's what would worry me is that every single game is against a good team with a good roster. So your guys have, it's not like your left tackle gets that 1 week off where it's like, all right, I can rest a little bit and get some time, get some time in. No. You're constantly going up against really good rosters. That beats up your roster. Injuries play a factor. It could be a really down year for the Chiefs. I'm not ready to predict that yet, but when you look at the schedule, it's brutal.
And they're doing so without Tyreek Hill, of course. And that 4-game stretch you mentioned there with the Chargers, followed by the Rams, Bengals, and Broncos, you get 2 divisional opponents there. And then the other 2 out of division opponents just so happen to be the ones that were in the Super Bowl this past year, and one of which beat you on the way to the Super Bowl. So yeah, not
that's your
an
first
ideal
place
stretch.
schedule. And you know what the funny thing is, you have to then flip that. So think about if you're the Denver Broncos. The Broncos get, you're like, oh, well, their schedule's got to be tough too. It's not as tough because they get the bottom tiers of the divisions they're visiting because they were a bottom tier. So when you look at their schedule, like, oh, well, they don't have to play the Bills. They get the Jets. You know what I mean? Like they don't have, like they get the bottom tiers versus the top tiers for those that flop. Like they don't get the Bucks. They get the Panthers. You know what I mean? Like it's just, that is huge. And it's one of the reasons why I think the Broncos could very well be in the running for the 1 seed versus the Chiefs. I mean, the Chiefs could be a wild card team this year and be better than the Broncos, but the Broncos just can find more wins on their schedule to win that division. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. The Jets and the Ravens, Mark, start the season with 4 straight. For the Jets, it's against the AFC North, and for the Ravens, it's against the AFC East. 4 straight
Really?
to start the year.
I
Isn't
didn't
that
see
wild?
The Jets start against the AFC North 4 games in a row.
Yep, just knock out the division right off the
Ravens,
bat.
Browns, Bengals, Steelers.
It's
that
the
is
first
brutal.
time in 18
They will be 0
years.
4. They will be 0 4.
Yeah, it's a really tough draw for a Jets team that got a lot better. And
that is brutal.
So
the Ravens
have
have the AFC East.
Yeah, so they could be 4-0 essentially outside of the Bills obviously is going to be who's who there, but yeah, that's an interesting start to the year for both. It's the first time in 18 years that an NFL team has opened the year by playing every team in another division. and two of the teams end up doing this.
Tough for the Jets because after that,
It really is.
it doesn't get much easier because then you have in division against the Dolphins team that I think is better than you, a Packers team, you're on the road, a Broncos team, you're on the road. You get to come back to your own division for the Patriots, Bills, Patriots.
Yeah.
Could the Jets be like 1-7 by week 8? I mean,
they could be.
And that's funny because you're like, oh, well, they're a bottom team. They should get an easy schedule. Well, it does get easier at the end of the year. They get Bears, Vikings, Lions, Jags, Seahawks all in the last 7 games. But, I mean, they got to find a way to beat the Dolphins, and they got to find a way to steal a game from the AFC North. Like, they have to find a way to steal a game from the AFC North.
Yeah,
and they got to. And if you're the Jets, you got to look at it and say, to be really competitive, you've got to split against the Dolphins and the Patriots. If you chalk up the Bills will sweep you, you've got to find a way to win one game against the AFC North, split against the other people in your division, the Dolphins and the Patriots, and then pray to God that you can beat the Bears, the Vikings, the Lions, like win the rest of the NFC North. And then the Jags so because you're talking about you want to see improvement, right? From a team that was really, really bad. You then want that means you want to see like 5-6 wins, right? You want to go from a 3-win team to a 5-6 win team. It's hard to find 5-6 wins for the Jets on there, and a team that I still think is just not going to be that good. Look out, I might be picking the Jets to be a 3-win team again.
It's a really tough draw for them. All right. Any notable matchups, Spark? I'll throw one out here to start. And it's the first game of the NFL season. I am very excited to see the Bills at the Rams for Thursday Night Football.
Alert.
Start the NFL season there. I mean, that's
bet
going to be one
now.
heck of a game.
You can bet it right now. Rams minus
really?
1.
What is it?
Rams -1. They're favored by 1 at home.
Interesting.
I think. Listen, there's a couple of big storylines that game you can't wait to see. How does Allen Robinson open up Cooper Kupp even more? You know what I mean? Like you cannot disrespect Allen Robinson. And in those times where people are like, no, we're not going to let Cooper Kupp beat us. Okay, Allen Robinson can absolutely beat you. So that's going to be a lot of fun to watch for that new look Rams offense. And I say new look because it is new look. Allen Robinson's such a different receiver than an OBJ. He's a bigger, more physical possession receiver, but can also it can crush you in that like 10 to 15 yard window down the field. And for the Bills, they add their rookie running back. They have they have kind of the weight, that pressure of being the team that, hey, we thought you were going to be the team to go toe to toe with Kansas City for years, and you lost to them in the second round. And then it's the Bengals. So like the Bills, I think, are feeling that pressure of like, we gotta be the AFC team to beat this year. I think it's a great first matchup. I'll also say week 1, Monday Night Football, Broncos at Seahawks. I mean, the NFL is the gift that keeps on giving. That's great.
Russell Wilson reunion tour already, right off the bat, right?
Yeah, and Sunday Night Football, the return of the unretired Tom Brady in Dallas.
Yeah.
So, they kicked off the season last year, and they get a rematch of that. So you got to love that is a week 1 matchup. And personally, I keep an eye out for whatever the Bears are doing, and you hopefully get Trey Lance versus Justin Fields, 2 second-year quarterbacks who both teams are hoping this is everything for them this year. Watching their rookie, again, it's not about winning games for the Bears. The Niners are in a different spot because they're more Super Bowl ready. It's about, is that the guy? And for the Niners, the Bears to start the season off against each other, both fan bases are going to want to see their guy prove that they picked the guy and not the other guy, especially for the Niners, because they could have just got Justin Fields. They traded up heaven and earth to go get Trey Lance. And so that'll be very, very fun.
Looking forward to that one. Week 4 has the Chiefs at the Buccaneers for Sunday Night Football.
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited to see that one, especially early in the year where you hope that both teams are at full strength. We'll really get to see, 2 of the Super Bowl front runners going at it early on with, healthy Tampa Bay The Chiefs with, yes, they don't have Tyreek Hill anymore, but they've added some new pieces and, shored up their defense as well. That one will be interesting to see. I could predict that one to be much more of a shootout than, in previous years where it's almost kind of reverted back to, the Buccaneers trying to win, ground and pound in some of these high profile matchup games. I could see this one getting out of hand quickly and it just being first to 45 points wins the game.
That's a really great week. Four's got a couple other great matchups beyond that. The Monday Night Football is Rams at Niners. Patriots at Packers is the CBS. That'll be Nance and Romo in the late game on CBS. So, and that's also when you get Bills Ravens. Couple good early matchups in the year, including where was it? I just saw it. Oh, Titans and Colts. So AFC early, AFC South. The two teams you expect to be battling the AFC South. So yeah, I agree. Week 4 is one of those keep an eye on. And also a lot of teams will be assessing because even though there's that 17th game, you still kind of break the season down to that first 4 games, second 4 games. You know what I mean? Those 4 game stretches for yourself. Yeah, absolutely. Sunday Night Football week 4 is going to be must watch.
Very excited for that.
I have a scheduled quirk if you liked it. I thought you might mention, but you hadn't yet. The Seahawks will travel an NFL high. They usually always travel the most because they're so far away. An NFL high, 29,466 miles. They will change time zones 34 times.
That's wild.
The Pittsburgh Steelers will travel
0 time zone changes.
0 time zone changes. They will play on the Eastern time zone the entire season. That is wild.
That's nuts. It is.
And that's because they're playing the NFC. We just talked about.
They're playing the NFC South. I believe.
Yes.
It is.
East.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the AFC East.
They got to be playing.
They are playing the Eagles, but they're not playing.
They can't be playing the Cowboys in Dallas because that would be Central Time Zone. So it would have to be the NFC East and the NFC South because New Orleans is Central Time Zone. It's crazy.
They are not playing the NFC South because I don't see the Panthers are not on here. Oh yeah, they are. Okay, yeah, it is the South.
So they get the South, but they must get the Saints in Pittsburgh. Yes, and they do. That is November 13th.
Yeah.
This is crazy. They go to Atlanta. They go to Carolina. They get the Raiders at home. Who else would be even an option? They're at the Eagles. They're at the Dolphins. They get the Bucks at home. Just a weird way that worked out.
Yeah, there's no one else. The Raiders are the only other team really.
Even in the preseason, they won't travel.
Had to go.
Even in the preseason, they host the Seahawks. Exactly. They're at the Jags and they host the Lions. That's crazy.
It is wild. It's very interesting to see that. I don't think I've ever seen that before. I feel they would have said that that's like a first time ever, so I'm sure it's happened before. But it is interesting to see that they're not even Central Time, which is just a very minor time zone change. It's 1 hour, but they don't even get that. So they are literally set to go there.
And for a Steelers team that needs all the breaks they can get to be, to be competitive for a playoff spot in a very tough AFC, that could be the breaking point. Like that's what we talked about, how there are probably 8 really elite starting quarterbacks in the AFC. There's only 7 playoff spots. How does a team like a Steelers steal a spot from an elite quarterback like a Justin Herbert or a Russell Wilson or whoever? It's because of something like that will happen. Like the Steelers get a lot of good breaks. Their schedule's workable. They don't move, and all of a sudden you stay healthy. And a team like Pittsburgh, all of a sudden you can see it's like, how did they end up with a 7 seed? Well, they only traveled 7,000 miles and they stayed in the Eastern time zone. Did you want to move on to another week, or can we skip ahead to week 16, Christmas?
We can go with that. The only other one I was going to mention was Monday night, week 8. If Deshaun Watson is playing for the Browns by that point, whether it be coming back from suspension or not, I mean, that could be Joe Burrow versus Deshaun Watson, two really good clubs in the AFC North.
Yeah.
At that point, jockeying for position, to start attacking that top spot, which is surely going to still be up for grabs at that point. That could be a very interesting matchup to watch,
Yes.
considering just the rosters for both
Halloween
teams.
night.
And oh yeah,
Brown.
that's I
We're in
didn't even realize
a
that.
lot of
Yeah,
Halloween colors, or a lot of orange.
a lot
I
of
will
orange.
say, the NFL has done themselves, I think, a scheduling service with the Browns, where obviously the Browns are, because of the interest of Deshaun Watson, and they are a very talented team. There's going to want to be eyeballs on them, but unless you know what's going on with the suspension in the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games for the Browns, they only have one primetime game, and it's a Thursday night, and they have the Steelers to cover that. It's hosting the Steelers. So the Steelers eyeballs, because they're such a giant brand, will cover that rating if there's no Deshaun Watson. And while a lot of people think Deshaun Watson could miss maybe 8 games to start the regular season, something like that, is exactly because of that. That first game back would be Monday Night Football on national TV. And then if you look later in the season, though, that is the only primetime game they have the Browns scheduled for. So the Browns have noon CBS times on every game except for that Thursday and except for that Monday. And then, of course, the late season. So the NFL could be telling you, we're suspending Deshaun Watson this year. You know what I mean? They really could, because they are completely nooned out except for 2 games. And the 2 games, you have Joe Burrow and you have the Steelers. So those are going to get eyeballs regardless.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, the ratings are the name of the game when it comes to these primetime games, but just the NFL in general. Not to mention the NFL stealing the NBA's thunder on Christmas Day as
Yeah.
well. You can imagine Adam Silver not too pleased with that one. But
It-
nonetheless, NFL is king, and they get another holiday here under their belt.
It just lined up perfectly. I mean, you get a Sunday
Yeah.
that is an NFL Sunday. They're going to dominate the whole weekend. Full Saturday slate on Christmas Eve, when who's busy on Christmas Eve anyways? You're sitting down. You got football. You got interesting matchups. You get the Bills at the Bears, Saints, Browns, Texans, Titans. But then you get some stuff that could be really good, like Bengals, Patriots. You get Eagles, Cowboys. That's a battle for the NFC East. You get Raiders at Steelers, NFL Network Saturday night. Plus, Sunday's schedule is really, really, I think, smart, because Packers, Dolphins, noon. You get the Packers brand, plus you get the East Coast Miami, and it's in Miami. So that's going to be beautiful weather Sunday. Aaron Rodgers and plus the Miami viewing on Fox. CBS, Broncos at Rams. Again, weather not a factor in LA. You get the NFC LA crowd watching, plus you get the Broncos, the AFC crowd watching, huge market in Denver. Plus then the night game is in Arizona. Again, weather not a factor, hosting the Bucks. And you think about it, the NBA likes to schedule their best teams and their biggest brands on Christmas Day, right? Well, now the NFL basically said, if you're using the Bucks, they have to be late because we're using the Packers. If you're using the Heat, they have to be late. They're in the Eastern Conference Finals because we're using the Dolphins early. If you're using the 2-time MVP in the Denver Nuggets, who will be better next year with Jamal Murray, well, you can't do that unless it's really early or, again, really late, because we're using the Broncos. Oh, and if you want to use either the LA teams, with like LeBron James or the Clippers, we're using the Rams in the middle of the day, so you can't do that. Then they say, oh, don't worry, you can still have the Phoenix Suns. They just were in the NBA Finals. They just got bounced out, but you got to use them early because we're using the Cardinals late, and they're going to be playing against Tom Brady. So it really is, you're going to get the Bulls on Christmas Day. I'm already calling it. You're going to get the Knicks on Christmas Day. I'm already calling it. You're going to get Philly, big East Coast Christmas Day stuff, because the East Coast cities, Boston, Chicago, not Eastern, but Eastern Conference, New York Knicks, Brooklyn because they didn't use any of the New York markets, and you're going to see those games try to compete late. They basically, the NFL laid their, you know what, on the table and said, you got to work around us. And it's just the way of the world now with the NFL.
Big time flex by Roger Goodell in the NFL. And if things couldn't get any worse for the Houston Texans, their back's already against the wall mark. They also got dealt a raw deal here as they have to face a team coming off of a bye 3 times this year, which is the most in the NFL.
Who did that to the Texans?
3 teams are going to get extra rest and extra prep time for the Houston Texans, which could be an early favorite for, the number one pick in the NFL draft. Meanwhile, there are 7 teams that will be facing 0 opponents coming off of a bye, that being the Bills, Lions, Broncos, Bucks, Chiefs, Bears, and Commanders. So
helping out
those teams getting a little bit of a break there. But yeah, an interesting, schedule release as it always is. Some stretches of these road games here, some stretches where it's, 3 to 4 straight home games for some teams, especially with the bye. Of course, we have the extended bye, given the extended NFL season in general. So we're going to see some more Week 14 buys in this one. And let me see. 3 teams won't be on Thursday Night Football this year, that being the Giants, Vikings, and Lions. And one other thing I wanted to note here. The Commanders play the New York Giants in back-to-back games. They have a bye week sandwiched in there, but they play at New York. They have a bye week, and then they come home and host New York. So back-to-back games for them.
We saw that last year, right, with Cleveland, and was that Cleveland and Pittsburgh?
I can't. It might have been. I honestly don't remember. I'm gonna try and check and see if I can find the.
While you do that, I want to mention
Brown schedule.
The most primetime games a team can have is 5, and the NFL loaded that up, and they have 13 teams have 5 primetime games, and there's some of these that make sense, right? Tampa makes sense, Chargers make sense, Packers make sense, Bills make sense, Chiefs make sense, Dallas makes sense because it's the Cowboys, Rams make sense. And then the Broncos and Bengals make sense. There are a couple other teams, though, of this 13 that I wonder if their fan bases are actually happy that they got 5 primetime games. I'll put it to you this way. I am very happy the Bears do not have 5 primetime games. The Bears have a very, very easy primetime schedule. Week 2, Sunday Night Football. They are in Green Bay. That they always get a Sunday Night Football, Bears, Packers. It is the rivalry in the football world, especially in the Midwest, and so you knew that was going to come. But beyond that, then they have a week, an October game, Thursday Night Football against the Commanders, and then the Patriots Monday Night Football the following week, and then that's it. So we will.
So why don't you like?
Well, because the Bears.
I enjoy watching my team in primetime.
Yeah, they always get embarrassed. It's just not good.
Well,
Bears historically. Yeah. Just not good on primetime. And so I get a lot of noon Bears on Fox. And that's when you're hoping your team, when you're not sure about how good your team's going to be, you get excited about that. So I'm going to list off a couple teams. I'm like, I don't know if these fan bases should be thrilled they're going to be on primetime a lot. The 49ers, they have 5. They're maxed out 5 primetime games. Mm-hmm. They are a very good team. They're going to be in these primetime games against other really good teams because of their own divisional games. And it could be a really up and down season depending on how Trey Lance plays. What say you on the Niners?
Yeah, I mean, in a year or two where there's so much unknown in terms of the quarterback position, it's hard to, if a Trey Lance is the guy and he's got to go under the bright lights 5 times, the pressure of that moment, the fact that they're going to be premier matchups because that's what the league wants. Yeah, it's
a lot.
That's tough to live up to. And honestly, the 49ers just seem like a team that need to step back for a second and take a breath. And while that's not, directly,
it's weird because they were in the NFC Championship game.
Yeah, but they're just they've had so many injuries.
Yeah.
certain things haven't come together. They've got this Debo Samuel thing over their head. The quarterback position is an unknown. I feel like this is a team that, look, guys, like you're so close to having all of the pieces here. Let's just like,
I know.
almost they almost want to just be that like silent assassin, right? But right now they're being thrust into the
Yeah.
limelight
I
because
feel the
they're,
similarly about the Eagles. The Eagles have 5 primetime games. Philly's a big market. They get
yeah,
a lot of
that's
those are
out
going
right
to be
now.
against Dallas and against in division. And Philly's a playoff team. But again, it's one of those teams that they surprised us they were a playoff team last year. It feels like even though they have a really good roster, it could be a letdown year. They have a tougher schedule, all those type of things. So if you're a Philly fan, I'd be a little concerned. And then the Patriots and the Steelers would be the other two that I'd be like, those are the 4 of the 13 teams that have 5 primetime games. Niners, Eagles, Patriots, Steelers. I'm like, oh, that I wouldn't be thrilled if I'm either of those fan bases to have that many primetime games. The Steelers could be flipping back and forth between quarterbacks. I mean, you obviously wouldn't be ideal. They have tough matchups because it's always against divisional opponents. You're going to be against the Bengals. You're going to be against the Ravens in those moments. And with the Patriots, again, Mac Jones, a second-year quarterback in a very tough AFC, Boston, big market, a lot of Patriots fans, but it could be one of those where I don't know how confident I am that the Patriots will win a lot of these games because the AFC is just so loaded.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely they've got a huge fan base type of move right there, and we're gonna, just slap them on there because they just aren't, the product's
Yeah.
not very good. And the Steelers are kind of in a, similar boat where we don't know how, enticing they're gonna be, but they have a giant fan base, so they'll get those games. And they're not easy. They got to play the Colts and Raiders and Browns and Bengals, and so they've got tough matchups there as well. But the Steelers tend to perform pretty well in prime time, so
Yeah.
that's why I'm fine, watching them in those games. And it's fun to see those extra, interviews that get done on your team, and just to be able to focus on them without the outside noise of the other games.
I agree. So do you want to go through it here really quickly? I think that's the last thing I wanted to do with this schedule is just kind of
Yeah.
give some time to talk about my Bears. Have you talk about some Steelers? You want to stay on the Steelers here and just kind of talk about what your gut reaction is when you saw the schedule?
Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, and this won't take too long, but it's the start is frustrating. It's a really tough stretch, I think, to go into their week 9 bye. I think they're in a tough spot there. I think they could easily be 3-5 going into their week 9 bye because they have to open against the Bengals. The
Yeah.
Patriots are never an easy win, regardless of Tom Brady not being there at this point. Then you got to go to Cleveland. That's not going to be an easy game. The Jets might give you a little bit of a reprieve there, but then you got to go to Buffalo. You got to
Tough.
play Tampa. You got to go to Miami, which that might be a little
Hot
bit of a
Sunday
rest,
night.
but it's yeah, and certainly that's in October where the weather's starting to get cool where they're at in Pittsburgh, and to go to a hot, muggy Miami that could be starting to really hit its stride there, depending on what happens with Tua. Certainly an explosive offense that could be problematic. And then you got to travel to Philly as well. That's no slouch before entering their bye. And they really, I mean, look, it's not a terrible schedule. I'm not going to say that they got, absolutely raked over the coals. Last year, they had the league's hardest schedule because
Yeah.
of their 11-0 start to begin the 2020 season. But, even after their bye, they got the Saints, Bengals, Colts. That's not easy. Then they've got, Ravens, Raiders, Ravens, Browns, to end the year with maybe one
It's
or two easier matchups sprinkled in. So, it's tough. And the main part of it being tough is that they play in a really tough division. There's no,
yeah.
every team in that division, you wouldn't be shocked if the Browns won the division next year, especially if, we find out that Deshaun's going to play sooner rather than later. So any of those teams could win the division. You wouldn't be surprised. And that just makes things really hard.
It is. It's got to be weird as a Steelers fan after all these years looking at your schedule and counting almost 4 wins when you see Bengals and Browns come up.
Yeah.
And now you look at those 4 games and you go, I hope we could be competitive. And if we can steal.
Yeah, you want to split them now.
As a Steelers fan, you're saying can we go 3-3 in division? If you can go 3-3 in division as a Steelers fan, then you say, all right, how do I find myself 6 more wins, become a 9-win team, and try to sneak into the playoffs this year?
And that's honestly where I think they'll be. My early projection, 9-8, 10-7 was kind of where I had, and I think that's the cap for them.
And we only have 1 year under our belt of the 17-game schedule, so you really start to look at it. You say, if your goal is for your team to just make the playoffs, you got to find yourself 9 wins. Because if you find yourself 9 wins, then you're at least in the conversation, right? You are in that last graphic in the hunt going into week 16, 17, 18. So can you find yourself 9 wins? And so, yeah, I agree that Steelers schedule, that's why I laugh, because when I wanted your thought on it, because I started looking through each team's schedule, just kind of going through it. And I get to the Steelers, and it's just so weird to see Browns and Bengals helmets and go, yo, that sucks.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait a minute, what the hell? Like, it's not how it's supposed to be. So for my Bears, I'll keep it short and sweet as well. I want to start by saying this. Over the next 2 to 3 months, you will see a lot of NFL national sports writers. I want to look directly into the camera. You're going to see a lot of national NFL sports writers saying the Bears will be a 3-win team. Bears will be a 4-win team. They don't know what they're talking about. They absolutely don't know what they're talking about. If you look at this schedule alone, the Bears are not going to be a 3, 2, 3, or 4-win team. They will be a 5-win team or better. Like, so anytime you see those predictions, it's going to be easy for guys like Ryan Clark on Get Up to be like, oh, let me go through and pick the schedule. Oh, and if I'm the Vikings, win against the Bears, win against the Bears. Like, it's going to be really easy for them to just do that, because that's what the national media is going to do, because the Bears offensively don't have the big names on offense, the powerhouse. But I think you're underrating David Montgomery, who I think is a very, very good NFL running back. An offensive line, besides one hole that you hope one of these rookies will really exploit and come out and play really well and earn that spot at right guard, is I think a better offensive line than even maybe last year's offensive line, depending on health. And a quarterback who we're going to see with an offense and an offensive mind that is what the modern NFL thinks. Not just a guy who thinks he's a genius, but actually like, no, this is what a modern NFL good offenses look like. So I can back that up by saying the Bears start the year hosting Niners at Packers. So what? They're 0-2, right? So what? They then get Texans, Giants. You could easily say by week 4, the Bears are 2-2.
Yeah,
a surprise 2-2 team. Then you're going to tell me in a 2-game stretch against the Vikings and Commanders, they couldn't go 1-1 or possibly 2-0, depending on how they're playing at that moment. There's no reason. Carson Wentz and the Commanders are going to be a complete wild card this year, how he plays, as far as projecting this goes. And the Vikings have a whole new coaching staff, just like the Bears. They have Kirk Cousins, and they have 2 great wide receivers, but they are rebuilding their defense. And so I'm just saying the Bears by week 6 could be 3-3.
500, yeah.
And you're saying to yourself, well, hell, already then they're going to be better than a 3-4-win team. They will find wins throughout the rest of the season because they have them. Patriots at New England is tough on Monday Night Football. I'm not going to lie. But again, cool matchup. We get to see Mac Jones versus Justin Fields, those quarterback class matchups. Then you have at Dallas. That's probably lost. Dallas is a better team than them on the road. Hosting Miami in early November. No reason why the Bears couldn't be competitive in that game. Find a way at home to steal that game. And you're only 1 game under 500 maybe at that point in time, heading close to as you get into mid-November, as you're closing in on your bye.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Lions and Falcons, like.
That's a stretch. That's the stretch.
And Jets.
The Bears have a 3-game stretch. Hosting the Lions, at the Falcons, hosting the Jets. After the Dolphins, which could be a win, where you say to yourself, that's a coin flip game. Right now on paper, those are 3 coin flip games. And I would argue the Bears are better than all 3 of those teams. And so you're telling me the Bears could be 3-3. And then maybe, even if worst case scenario, they lose the Patriots, lose the Cowboys, lose the Dolphins, they're 3-6. Then you get Lions, Falcons, Jets. The Bears could be 6-6 as they host the Packers after their bye in week 12 and early December. And then, yeah, it's a tough stretch down the math. It's Packers, Eagles, Bills. So then what? They're 6-9. And then they close out the season with a Lions and a Vikings team. I'm just saying this Bears team, anyone who's sitting there saying the Bears are an easy 3-win team, it's not. They are a 6-win team that is probably not that good to be a 6-win team.
And they could get to 8, though. I could see them
But they could get to 8 depending on breaks and how other people's seasons fall out. So again, I'm not going to say if I find a way to put the Bears as the 7th seed, I'm telling you right now, a lot of it is going to have to do with is because the schedule favors the Bears finding 8-9 wins. It could. It really could. And so when the national media, Bears fans out there, I'm speaking to you, when they say, oh, the Bears are through a team, they're terrible, check, easy win. That is hold your horses. I think this Bears team is really a 6-win team, 7-win team, but they could end up being an 8 or 9-win team.
Yeah, I totally agree with it. And I think that stretch of home games in December really matters. And they enter that game against Philly at home, coming off of a bye. That's not a gimme for the Philadelphia Eagles either. They're not, a phenomenal team that we think is just going to be amazing. Now they got some talented players, but the
more
Bears
continuity, second-year coach, but again, I'm counting those games as losses. Like
exactly. You're going to get one where they win.
Losses, and you're finding 6 wins already. So the Bears here I'll end on this, and I should tweak this out, and I should pin it because I do feel strongly about this. If the Bears are a 4-win or less team, 2 things would have happened. Justin Fields got very injured and missed the year, or he is not the starting quarterback of the future for the Chicago Bears. That is an absolute. If the Bears are 4 wins or less, they need to find a new quarterback, or their quarterback started less than half the games. Because I truly feel as though, and if they started truly less than half the games, then they probably should find a new quarterback anyways. Because already he had injury issues as a rookie. And a lot of that is bad offensive line, bad play calling, but he's a little bit fragile because he's a like Gumby. He's stringy. He is flexible in the pocket and he moves. Even though he's physical and he's big, he's got meat on his bones. If the Bears are a 4-win or less team, then Justin Fields probably isn't the quarterback, and they need to go get another quarterback.
I think early on, and obviously I haven't gone through the whole system where we kind of pick wins from each week, and then we come up with I think I'm going to end up having them as a 7-win team. I can just kind of see.
Yeah, when you look at the schedule, it feels that way.
Yeah,
it just feels that way.
It does. It was a very fun schedule release. It is, every year, but this year with so many new elements to it, I think it's exciting to see some of these premier matchups and what these teams got going on. So
what kills you as a fan is when you look at those stretches, right, of like Jets, Lions, Falcons, like there's our 3 wins. And then it's like the week before, it's like, oh, your quarterback gets a concussion. You know what I mean? Like you can't predict it. But and that's what makes the NFL so great too, is that you look at these schedules on paper and you say, my team should be a 12-win team. But if your injury happens at the wrong time, your 12-win team can quickly become a 7-win team. And if you're saying to yourself, oh man, my team could be an 8-win team. If the injury comes the wrong time, that team's a 3-win team. You know what I mean? Because that's what just makes it so fascinating. And again, the NFL did a really good job. And when you look at the schedule, the non-primetime stuff, like, oh, the Bears and Niners are not prime time. The Bears and the Texans are not prime time. The Bears and the Jets is not prime time. But all of those games are second-year quarterbacks who are trying to earn the right to be in their you know what I mean? Like, we'll have fun things to talk about. Yeah. They'll have meaning. Those games will have meaning because of the second-year quarterbacks. I can't remember the Jags especially. I could look it up, but I don't want to. I know we're wrapping up here. But it's the same thing. They're not in prime time a lot, but he's got a lot of those matchups against, young quarterbacks, and it's fun, and we'll get that entertainment of it as well.
Sure thing. Absolutely. And I think we're all looking forward to it, chomping at the bit, ready for the season to start already, but we've got a few months to wait.
I'm just
on
getting
that
ahead.
one,
I'm
so.
getting ahead of the. Wow, Mark picked the Bears to be the 7th seed.
Well, look, I agree with you though too.
I'm putting it in. Planting the seed for our listeners. This is where it starts.
A lot of the analysts do get carried away sometimes, and that's why the fans who pay closer attention to their team end up being like, "You don't know what you're talking about because what about this and that?" And a lot of these analysts probably didn't think about
No, and
those
it's hard.
various things.
It
And
is
it is
hard
it's a hard
being a
job.
national analyst.
Yeah,
When we
you
try to
can't know
cover,
everything about every team.
no, we try to
You
cover
can't.
things, and like there are certain things that happen. You're like, oh crap, that's right. They have that person, or that person's injured. Like I'm trying to, I'm trying for the NBA for my other show, and it's like, oh crap, like that's right. That person's not on that team, and you just it
Yep.
is. It gets you. I was at a Cardinals versus Giants game on Saturday just because my fiance and I went down to St. Louis just because I get free tickets to the
That's
stadium.
right. I did see that. Yeah.
And we're just like, oh, why not? It's a beautiful Saturday. She's a Cardinals fan. I don't care. It's like, well, let's go drink some beers, have a good time. Jock Peterson gets him to bat for the Giants. I'm like, oh shit, Jock Peterson's on the Giants. I was like, oh, that's right. Evan Longoria.
The journeyman.
He's been Evan Longoria as a Giant. He's been there for a couple of years, but you forget stuff like that.
For sure. Guys on the move, man, and the NFL is the epitome of that as well. As this past offseason has shown us for sure. So exciting stuff. That's the NFL schedule recap episode. I'm glad that we were able to get some great matchups to discuss here in this one, and hope you all enjoyed. But until next time, it's been Mark and Dan on the Football Lounge.